So the text that I chose for this activity was Stone Fox by John Reynolds Gardner, illustrated by Marcia Sewall. And I started off with the text for just analyzing this illustration here. And what I was able to infer was that this story would be about a dog and a boy, and it looks like he is a country boy. And I can see that the dog is pretty well trained. He has his leash in his mouth, isn't running away. So that's what I got from that illustration. As I continued to the next page, I saw that the chapter title was called Grandfather, so I inferred that based on this title that the characters would be the grandfather and the grandson, and I pulled the grandson character back from the illustration. The paragraphs in this text weren't very cut and dry with the flow, so I just kind of estimated what paragraph each one was. So for paragraph 1, I made a text-to-text connection in the very first sentence about the grandfather in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory book, because it says about how he wouldn't get out of bed. So I immediately thought about the grandfather from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and wondered if they had any similarities of reasons for not getting out of bed. The next strategy I used was questioning. In paragraph 2, it talks about at first little Willie thought he was playing, and it made me think, okay, is his grandfather not getting out of bed because he's dead? His eyes might be open, he passed away, and I thought to myself that that would be a pretty rough start to a story if it started off with a little boy finding his grandfather dead. In paragraph 3 and a little after, we learn about the relationship between Willie and his grandfather, and it seems like a really good relationship. It makes me analyze the characters and their relationship, and I'm happy to see that the grandfather is kind and has a good relationship with Willie. And then I start to question, where are Willie's parents in this situation? Paragraph 4 has me draw on my background knowledge. Talks about that they lived on a farm and grandfather always got up real early in the morning. My schema of the lifestyle of farmers is called on for this, and I assess that, since they're living on a farm, it makes sense that the grandfather tends to get up early. In paragraph 5, we learn of a tough love lesson that the grandfather taught to Willie, and it helped me further analyze the relationship and feel that the parents really aren't involved if the grandfather is the one waking him up in the morning, feeding him, and teaching him life lessons of being responsible. Paragraph 6, I made a connection to my personal experience because my grandfather recently passed away, and thinking about, Willie saying, "Get up, grandfather, I don't want to play anymore," waiting for his grandfather to get up. I'm still not sure if his grandfather is alive or dead, but in my situation, my grandfather passed away, so it made me a little anxious to think about finding your grandpa dead and having to deal with those emotions, and I hope that I have empathy for this child, and I hope that he doesn't have to go through that loss of a grandfather, especially since he's such a role model in his life. In paragraph 7, we learn that there's a dog named Searchlight. It's a little question went off my brain wondering why his name was Searchlight, so I used strategy of asking questions there. In paragraph 8, we learn that Willie is 10 years old. And then in paragraph 9, it tells us that he runs a mile down the road, and my schema is telling me that that's a long way for a 10-year-old to go on a run by himself with a dog. He's very young to be running a mile to go get help. In paragraph 10, we meet Doc Smith, and based on the details from the author, I can infer that she's elderly based on her snow-white hair, and her skin and face were covered with wrinkles. So those descriptions from the author help me infer that she's not a young doctor, she's an older doctor. On page 6, I'm analyzing this illustration. It's rather simple illustration, but you can really see how desperate Willie is to get to the doctor. He's sprinting through the trees, his arms flailing, and Searchlight is pretty desperate, sprinting his long legs as well, and clearly the doctor is not aware that they're on their way. For paragraph 11, when the doctor's talking to Willie about his grandfather, she doesn't seem that worried. She's saying it's probably just another trick, nothing to worry about, and she's not catching on or worried about Billy's desperation, saying, but he's still in bed. And I think the fact that the doctor is saying that it's just another trick, I can critique these characters and assess that the grandfather seems to be known or has a reputation for being a trickster. Willie has shared, some tricks with us in the beginning of the story that Grandpa used to pull, and now the doctor's under the impression that the grandfather is just pulling a trick on him. So then they talk a little more about grandfather, and the thing that seems to really alarm the doctor is the fact that he went to bed without playing his harmonica. So I'm asking myself the question, why is the fact that he went to bed without playing the harmonica worry her? That's not something that normally strikes people as odd. So I'm wondering if this is a ritual of his or something he's known for being passionate about doing, or there must be some reason where not doing it strikes alarm for the doctor. So she asks Willie to go hitch up Rex, and even without reading any further, hitching up an animal, I infer that Rex is a horse, which is confirmed in the next paragraph. In paragraph 14, I'm searching for information. It's been a little while now. We're on page 7 of the book, and I'm really curious to figure out if the grandpa is dead or not. And I get my first clue in paragraph 14 because there are Searchlight licks the grandfather's beard, which was full of tears. So in my head, my schema on the topic of tears, I know that they dry up rather quickly. So if he had been dead all night, his beard would not still be full of tears. So I'm pretty confident, based on that information, that the grandfather is still alive. And the fact that there are tears in his beard in this situation, he's clearly not in a good place right now, which is a sharp contrast to the topic brought up in the beginning of the story, because talking about grandfather laughing so hard he cried, and when he cried his beard filled up with tears. So an example of a happy cry with beard tears and a sad cry with beard tears. So that was just a little analysis of the text comparing grandfather's tears and crying. Next, in paragraph 15, I'm making a connection to my personal attitude if I was in the situation that Willie's in. He's asking lots of questions. What's that for? Little Willie asks, what are you doing now? And Doc Smith is like, must you ask so many questions? And that makes me think that I would be doing the same thing if I was him. Growing up, my mom was sick a lot. We were always in the hospital, and I just remember always asking questions, even though I was quite old enough to know what was going on. Asking questions helped me feel better, to at least feel a little bit more in control of the situation, and I think Willie was probably feeling the same thing, wanting to know what was happening. Must be scary to wake up and not have your grandfather move or talk or anything. Next, I'm analyzing the illustration on page 8. Looking at the scene of the bedroom with the sick grandfather. The dog seems really worried. Willie seems to be looking at the doctor for some kind of confirmation of what's going on. And for some reason, it kind of looks like the doctor's smiling, which personally would annoy me if I was actually in this scene. But I don't know if she's actually smiling or not. It just looks like it a little bit. So then I continue. I'm going to build a theory through inferencing, because the doctor's asking Willie, do you owe anybody money? Willie's saying, no, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And the doctor is, I think, asking about the crops, asking about money, kind of seeming like maybe reasons for suicide. That might be a little too dark, but that was just my theory based on the questions that the doctor was asking Willie. So when the doctor says nothing's wrong with the grandfather, I'm really empathizing with Willie because he's not dead, then what is he doing? Something has to be wrong. How can you tell me nothing's wrong? So feeling really bad for Willie in this moment. Also, I'm drawing on my prior knowledge of how physicals and uh, doctor assessments work on health, and this seemed like a very lackluster effort to figure out what was wrong with him and then just decide that he doesn't have the will to live. That was a pretty quick assumption after not very many tests, and I'm not sure what age, this story took place, but I was a little shocked just knowing from, current medicine, the procedures that are done to figure out what's wrong with people and just seems like just use a stethoscope and then decide that he's given up the will to live seemed a little dramatic. But I'm making character connections with Willie on paragraph 11 because he has decided that he's going to bring it on himself to help his grandfather find the will to live again. That's a lot of pressure to put on a boy, and I'm just making that character connection with him because I'm empathizing with him, and I just really want things to work out for him. And then lastly, I've finished the text I'm processing. I'm summarizing the information in my head, and it seemed like Willie and his grandfather had a really good relationship. And so I'm kind of confused about what's going on. Why doesn't he want to, quote unquote, want to live anymore? When he has such a great grandson, the crops are doing well, they don't owe anyone money. He seems like he laughs a lot. So I'm really curious to figure out what happened to the grandfather to make such a dramatic change. And then my last question I'm thinking is, if the grandfather does die, what will happen to Willie? He clearly doesn't have any parents, lives with the grandfather alone, it seems, and I'm just worried about what will happen to Willie. So that's my question for that.